All right, what's popping, everybody? Welcome back to the 2026 FNB App Academy. I am Karabo Mohole, from grassroots to greatness. Right, so there's a beautiful saying, right? Even though your beginning was small, your latter end will increase even abundantly so. That speaks about, starting off from the bottom and going all the way to the top. All right, so if you're watching this, congratulations. You've made it as one of the top 50,000 students in the program. That is an incredible achievement. All right, so now this is where the hard work begins, and let's talk a little bit about how things are going to work. All right, so the Johannesburg Business School at University of Johannesburg has put together a comprehensive 10-week course just strictly for you guys. So the first 5 weeks will focus on digital skills and entrepreneurship, and the second 5 weeks will focus on app development and practical coding skills, right? So that's one module a week for 10 weeks. So that's 5 modules on digital skills and as well as 5 modules on app development. So at the end of each module, there will be an assessment that must be completed before you guys can move on to the next module. All right, cool. So when you have worked through all your modules, you will receive a certificate of completion from the University of Johannesburg, which is UJ. Yet again, well done. And please do keep up the hard work, because the App Academy is a platform that can change your life and take you from grassroots to greatness. All right, awesome. So before we get started, let's hear from one of our past graduates to speak about this particular platform, which is the App Academy, and what it did for them.
My father, rest in peace to him, he used to work at tech companies, but I was young, I didn't know anything about tech. I was very much into sound engineering, music, production, all those things. I was very good at it. So when the App Academy came around, I was like, you know what, let me just try this thing. Maybe I might like it. Enjoyed it. And I was like, you know what, okay, I'm gonna try bootcamp again with Leaping Code. And it's like, it was a stepping stone to everything that's been happening. A lot has been happening ever since then, so yeah. And from there, I've met amazing people. Just recently finished an international competition where we got to represent South Africa at the BRICS Plus competition. That was exciting. First time ever doing that. Reversing people from China. Gosh, hey, it was rough, but we learned a lot. Even now, there's still things coming on the way. My homies, we starting out a business from that whole adventure. The FNB App Academy is definitely a plug for young people. Like, even if you don't have any experience, I didn't have experience at all, and it opened up a whole new world to me. I mean, now I'm talking about opening businesses. I feel like I'm talking crazy. The journey itself, like, it's so vast. There's so many opportunities. It doesn't matter which way you want to go. There's a place for someone somewhere. Well, I know my vision is to create, tech that the world uses instead of us always consuming from your Americas and Chinas and stuff, you know. Maybe improve something that's already there that the world can, you know, use. So one of the dreams is to have a company that may provide something along those lines.
All right, so awesome stuff. All right, so right now it's time for us to get started with our first lesson on digital skills and entrepreneurship. Remember, this part of the course will cover over 5 weeks and is split into 5 modules consisting on 4 topics each. So for example, our first module is on digital literacy and productivity tools. So this is split into 4 topics. So the first topics will be the foundations of digital literacy and the triad model. The second will be introduction to AI, which is concepts, capabilities, and critical limitations. So the third topics will be building your second brain, so code, para, and productivity tools. And the fourth topic will be safety, data, and digital footprint, which is POPIA and algorithmic awareness. All right, whew. So that's a lot of material to get through. So we're gonna make things a little bit easier. So instead of releasing 1 long episode, we'll be releasing 2 episodes per module. So the first lesson will cover topic 1 and 2, and the second lesson will cover topic 3 and 4. Now, at the end of module 1, there will be an assessment available on the learner management system, which you must complete in order to move on to get your certificate. All right, cool. So if that's all clear, let's head into module 1, topic 1 and 2. So please, let's welcome our lecturer, Devon Pabu.
Hello and welcome to Module 1 of the FNB App Academy, brought to you by Johannesburg Business School at the University of Johannesburg. My name is Devon Parbu, and I will be your lecturer for the Future Ready Digital Entrepreneurship Skills Program. I'm thrilled to have you here with us as we begin this journey together. Whether you're running a solopreneur enterprise, a freelance design studio, catering business, or a growing e-commerce store, the tools and technologies of the digital economy are now the terrain in which every business competes. Digital capability is no longer optional for the South African entrepreneur. It is the foundation of modern success. The opportunity in the current gap that the research tells us is that only 23% of South African entrepreneurs have sufficient digital capabilities for the modern economy, compared to 47% globally. But we don't see this as a lack of talent. We see it as a gap in access and training. This module specifically is designed to close that gap for you. You aren't behind, you're early. The entrepreneurs who build genuine digital capability are now positioning themselves far ahead of the market. And this core shift is what's important for us to understand, and we'll unpack this throughout the course and material. Instead of utilizing technology, we need to move from utilization to orchestration. And in this module, we're aiming to make that shift for a specific threshold moment. Most people practice technology utilization. They use a tool for its obvious and specific purpose, like sending a WhatsApp message. We want to move you toward technology orchestration, the ability to deploy tools strategically and in combination to create business value that wouldn't be possible without them. We want to move you from being an operator of tools to being the conductor of a digital system. So Module 1 is the foundation of this entire program. And over the next few hours, we will cover 4 critical submodules. The first, we'll explore the foundations of digital literacy using what we call a triad model to show you how digital, data, and AI literacy build upon each other. In the submodule 2, we'll provide a practical introduction to artificial intelligence, or AI, stripping away the magic to show you how it functions as a capacity equalizer for your business. In submodule 3, we'll help you build your second brain using the code method and the para framework in Notion to ensure the best business ideas that you have never fall through cracks ever again. And then finally, we'll tackle safety, data, and your digital footprint, ensuring that you understand the POPI framework obligations and how algorithms shape your business visibility. So use this as your companion. Use it to record your reflections and complete your exercises as we refer back to these frameworks as you grow throughout the course. Everything that follows in this program depends on this groundwork that we lay here today. Let's get started on building your digital future. So by the end of this module, you'll be able to define the digital literacy and explain its roles as the foundation for data and AI literacy using the triad module, build a mental model for AI, how it works, where it fails rather, and how to engage with a sense of critical awareness when dealing with artificial intelligence. As mentioned previously, we're going to apply this code method to capture, organize, distill, express knowledge to build your second brain. And the important thing about the code method is really around organizing. And I'll unpack exactly how the brain was never designed to really store information. Our brain is generally created in order to generate ideas. And I'll show you exactly how we can organize these ideas in a systematic manner so that you can distill it and then express that knowledge in order to create for your organization. And then lastly, penultimately, construct a second brain using the Para framework with Notion AI as the primary platform to do so. And then lastly, we're going to recognize that your digital footprint and understand the rights that you have from a data perspective and identify how the Poppy framework provides obligations for you as an entrepreneur and as a business owner. So let's get started. One of the big misconceptions about digital literacy is that people treat it as a destination, but it's the foundation upon which every other skill in this program is built on. So for digital literacy, what's important to understand as part of our objectives for this segment is that we have to define what literacy means. We have to define what it means to be digital and explain how its role in the foundation is a prerequisite for both using data and using artificial intelligence. We'll discuss the 5 competency areas for building digital literacy, and this is governed by the DigComp 2.2 framework, and apply them to your business context. We'll explain what this triad model looks like, how we think, how we critically analyze, and what I call cognitive communicative, which is really how we build a mental model for using any type of literacy when building a product, we're building a business, and engaging with our customers. And then lastly, it's about distinguishing between both technology utilization and technology orchestration, and you being the conductor in the symphony of your business, and identify exactly, I've got an assessment where we'll assess exactly which stage you're in when considering how you use technology across your business. So we've got 2 entrepreneurs, if you'd like to think about it in this way. We've got 2 individual stories. So the first individual uses WhatsApp to chat with their customers, digitally literate in every single way of the sense, right? But stuck in its basic use. The second individual, however, uses WhatsApp for business to create catalog of products, to create autorespond messages, to display their operating hours, and to accept payments, whether through SnapScan or anything of that nature. But they're leveraging the tools, and they're leveraging this tool specifically to scale their organization. And this is where the gap comes in. And this is why we see that 23% of South African entrepreneurs have the digital capabilities to leverage the applications. However, we aren't orchestrating the technology, right? And this gap, it might be, globally might be 47%, but it still holds true as far as the access and training gap. At only 50% globally of entrepreneurs are using technology in order to orchestrate their businesses. So this, as mentioned previously, this is not a talent gap. We all can use the technology. We can use these applications. But today we're going to close that gap through how you can access it and how you can set up your business profile. And then lastly as well, how we're going to close the gap from a training perspective, right? So I've got this little quote that I thought, as I was putting together the material and synthesizing the content, this sort of landed with me, right? That understanding how to leverage AI and big data is not optional for any entrepreneur. It's becoming the baseline requirement for competitive advantage. And I think that's the key idea around this is that the most significant digital learning experiences happen when people apply technologies across their business to solve real problems in society and in your communities. Not when we have to merely learn about these tools and applications in an abstract manner. So, what are the 5 competency areas that we want to be focusing on in order to build digital literacy? The 5 areas, the first one is information and data literacy. So how do we interpret information that hits our desk? When we have a spreadsheet of information with customer information, maybe it's name, surname, ID number, maybe it's the type of product that they've purchased from you, the price point, when they've seen your social media post, what time of day they saw your social media post, what time of day they interacted with your business, the information that's on your Google business profile. It's about finding, evaluating, and using this information to make business decisions. The second, around communication and collaboration, is really around how we used our digital channels effectively. As mentioned before, it was WhatsApp for Business or building your Google Profile Manager. You're using email or your customer relationship management system, like HubSpot, for example. It's how do we use those platforms in order to communicate and collaborate with our customers. Thirdly, digital content creation. It's about producing content posts such as social media posts for Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or LinkedIn, creating product descriptions, promotional material with tools like Canva or Notion, or even a large language model with an integration into the likes of Canva or Notion in order to use natural language in order to create artifacts. But we're using these technologies in order to create content using digital mechanisms. I think the fourth one is massively important. It's around safety, right? How do we protect the personal information of our customers as well as of our business? It's about building your business and a business brand voice and your customer information, and how do we store that and how do we protect that information, right? And then lastly, about problem solving. It's about using digital tools to solve business challenges creatively rather than just defaulting to a manual approach. So I want you to think about these 5 areas. In your learner guide, there's a rubric that you've got that I'd like you to reflect on where you find yourself in each of these competency areas, in information and data literacy, in communication and collaboration. Rate yourself on that scale of 1 to 5. We're going to come back to that, but it's important that you do an introspective evaluation of where you find yourself and how you're using data and information to make business decisions. How are you using your systems in order to communicate with your customers and track how you communicate with them? How are you using the likes of Canva or Photoshop or any of the Adobe Suite applications in order to create material if you're using that? And then safety, how are you protecting the IP of your business, and how are you protecting your customer information in order to continue to build trust and relationship with your customers in a safe manner? And then lastly, around problem solving, how are you using these digital tools in order to problem solve for your customers' problems and your community related challenges? So let's jump into the triad model. We've got digital literacy right at the foundation. It's basic technological competencies, as we've spoken about in the previous slide, that we need in order to function in digital environments. Right? Second onto that is around data literacy. And I find this to be vitally important, not just for an entrepreneur, but for corporates. And as you scale your business and as you hire more individuals, it's important that you understand there's an age-old concept and saying around garbage in is garbage out. That's what you're going to get on the other side of your process. And data literacy helps us understand how we interpret what we've collected, what process we've embarked on and what process we've put that data through or that information through in order to get the output. And that output is either accessible through your spreadsheet or through your CRM, customer relationship management system, or accessible through any other application that you use in order to make decisions, like an analytics or Facebook analytics or Instagram analytics or anything of that nature, so that you can make a decision for your business. On top of that sits artificial intelligence and AI literacy, which is really our engagement layer. But this requires that we've already built the building blocks for both data as well as digital literacy. So AI literacy sits on top of both digital and data literacy. Right? It's the engagement layer that interacts with your data, that builds predictions of that data, and integrates into your digital applications to ensure that it's got access to a contextual knowledge base of your organization, as opposed to fabricating information and going out into the ether or onto the open internet and the open web in order to collect information, in order to make a decision. But we'll jump into AI literacy quite extensively in the second submodule. Right, so digital literacy is the foundation concept essential for understanding and engaging with both data and AI literacy. If we don't get those 5 competencies around digital literacy locked in, we're building on a foundation of sand as opposed to a foundation of concrete. So each literacy, and in particular around digital literacy, has 3 legs. And if you think of a tripod, the first leg of that tripod is technical skills. So we need technical skills to help us choose the right tools and understand the tools' limitations themselves. From a technical perspective, we need to know exactly how these digital systems and data processes and AI tools actually work. How are they put together? If you think of building a website, what's if we were to decompose a website rather, what is it constructed of? It's constructed of a header. It's constructed of some maybe CSS. So we've got the CI of your brand built into the website that structures the way it renders and the way it looks. That informs the UI and the UX of the website. Then we've got the body of the actual website, and that's deconstructed into many different segments. And then we've got the footer of the site as well. And that's very simply put around just understanding the basic structure of a website, and it can get a lot more complex. But from a technical perspective, it's understanding that I'm not just going to put a website together, but I need to understand exactly where I want people to navigate on my website. What does the real estate of my website look, so that I'm able to maintain attention. Right? I'm able to, when people land on my website, they engage with it in a very meaningful manner, and potentially if there's a form on the site, they complete that form, and you collect that information in order to help you make a business decision. The next step around literacy is then moving from that technical understanding of how the technology works. It's moving on to actually thinking, and this is where we find the use of artificial intelligence in the world of work today, is that people are not thinking around how to use AI to get the right output that they're looking for. Instead, they're treating AI as a search engine without providing context. Really not understanding exactly how it functions. So the second pillar of the triad model is critical thinking. It's the ability of ourselves to avoid blindly following just a platform or a recommendation or any output that we've created by use of these digital systems or artificial intelligence. The challenge with AI at the moment is that we are we're not following, but we are treating our AI outputs as a search engine. And that's because the user interface that we've used for many a year in the form of Google, prior to that was Yahoo, but the user interface has never changed, right? We searched for content in a dialog box. We're treating AI in the same way. that because the UI looks the same or very similar, our brain interprets that as I can use this to search for information. The problem with this is that AI doesn't search, it predicts based on data. Right? So we need to avoid blindly following just an output from the use of artificial intelligence or any of our digital tools, which largely have AI baked into it already. We need to avoid blindly following the output by thinking critically about what we want to achieve. And that's the second pillar of any literacy type, and in particular for this case, digital literacy. Lastly, communicative cognitive, a big word, a very academic term, but simply put, we need to build a mental model that keeps you as being the author of your own judgment, right? Not the system that you use. So the system that you use, whether it's your CRM, I mentioned HubSpot earlier, but it could be Salesforce, it could be Zoho. We need to use these systems to give you insights in order for you to be the judgment and orchestrator of judgment, right? So interpreting, integrating, and communicating with digital content accurately and responsibly. So we're about to dive into technology orchestration versus or technology utilization versus technology orchestration. And at this juncture, I want you to pause the video and take a 5-minute leg stretch. Make a cup of coffee or get a glass of water or something of that nature. Think about how you use your technology. How you use WhatsApp, how you use your Google business profile if you've created one, how you use Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, or LinkedIn, wherever your audience lies. I want you to take the next 5 minutes and just think about how you use them. And then when you're ready, unpause the video and we'll continue. Welcome back. So technology utilization means using digital tools for what they were obviously designed to do. Sending a WhatsApp message, scrolling through Instagram, or searching Google. Prompting a large language model has become a new way of utilizing technology, at least over the last 6 years or so. And this is where most people start. The challenge is we stay there. We're just using technology to scroll, to search, to prompt, or to send a message, instead of orchestrating the use of these technologies, right? And that's why technology orchestration is fundamentally different. So technology orchestration is fundamentally different. It means deploying digital tools strategically and in combination to create business value. And business value that would not be possible without these technologies. It's the difference between posting on Instagram because your customers are there and building an Instagram strategy that drives customers to your WhatsApp business profile or WhatsApp business account. And where you automate greeting sequences, you surface your product catalog, you inform your customers around how they can get in contact with you, or you engaging with your customers on WhatsApp, but then at the same time, surfacing a payment option through use of SnapScan that now converts that engagement into revenue. So you're monetizing that entire engagement sequence and converting them from just scrolling customers in order to paying customers. And that's ultimately we want to get to, right? So acquiring digital competencies follows a non-linear process. And what I want you to understand here is that utilizing technology versus orchestrating technology are fundamentally two different things, right? They require different behaviors from you. They require that you actually spend time investing into the different applications and understanding exactly how you can integrate one system into the next and orchestrate these applications. So there are two individuals that I've got here that do this extremely well. We've got Peter Levels from, he's a solopreneur, a one-person organization, and he's built over 70 products and generates roughly just over $3 million US dollars in revenue annually. And he uses Apple Notes, and Apple Notes are integrated into his GitHub, And he uses Vercel in order to automate deployments. So he creates notes on, he captures his ideas rather in Apple Notes. And from those notes, GitHub analyzes that information using its GitHub Copilot. It analyzes that information, and from there automates the deployment of content into his website. And Stripe facilitates the payment, but he uses Twitter, or X rather, as his social media platform of choice in order to act as a lead generation entity. Right. And all of these applications are feeding into each other in order to generate revenue. But he doesn't do any of the work. And there's no manual work that's done. As mentioned earlier, there's an automated deployment from his development engine all the way through to his front end, his website. So all of this information feeds into the other, from one to the other, with no manual intervention. What Peter does, he's the orchestrator or the conductor that sits on top of his entire tech stack, and he's analyzing where there are potential bottlenecks so that he doesn't become a bottleneck from one application to the next, because our time is limited, right? He's the conductor, not the operator. The next individual that I'd like to talk about is Justin Welsh, and he's got a newsletter that has got arguably the most followers, most subscribers, called the Saturday Solopreneur. So what he does is he creates his content engine in Notion AI. We'll jump into Notion in submodule 3. But he creates his content there, and he plans his content using a very structured manner. Notion is integrated into Typefully. Typefully is used as his scheduling application. So he creates the content schedule, but he doesn't physically get involved in the button pushing activities around sending the information from one application to the next. The content goes from Typefully into ConvertKit, which is his email newsletter application, and it's triggered from there. So he's got his schedule that says, hypothetically speaking, he's got a schedule that for a newsletter to go out every Saturday morning, and the content is then created around his desired area of discussion in Notion. It's then pulled into Typefully as the schedule, and it's scheduled for Saturday morning at 9 a.m. The email content is then built in ConvertKit into his desired template, and it's triggered at 9 o'clock to go out, so it sends out to his mailing list as well. And he uses Stan Store for converting any of the clicks and any of the engagement that he picks up from ConvertKit into revenue from a sales perspective. So each tool, as we've seen, not just across Justin, but also in Peter, each tool feeds into the next, and that system compounds value, and the system compounds effort. So let's take a listen to this quick video, a listen and a watch to this quick video. Justin is going to take us through how he applies his marketing principles to his business to create a content engine that monetized his newsletter. Let's take a watch.
There's the path of like being very specific, and there's the path of being very viral and generic. I am really specific on solopreneurship. Like, we talk about the same stuff every single day, all the time, right? So as you grow your audience, the audience that you're growing is specific. My first product was $50. If they spend $50, can you deliver $50,000 of value and like set the stage for a deep future relationship for the next decade, right? You have that option. A few years later, you could do a core product as your audience grows and maintains specificity, right? Then if you keep growing like me, get to a million followers, 1.5 million across a few platforms, you can drop your high ticket offer like I did with the Creator MBA, because I've been beating the same drum for so long. The reverse of that is when you don't have a specific audience, when your audience is relatively generic, when you're talking about things like just general productivity, for example, right? Productivity in and of itself is a thing, but there are so many different types of productivity. It can get so much more niche than that. And so what happens is you might have a harder time as your audience grows we don't think about that when we're creating our content, when we're building our brands. We're trying to be entertaining and get the most likes. It's like, no, be that guy. Be the guy who solves a very specific problem that's painful for a very specific company or person.
All right. Well, my guest today is the one and only Justin Welsh. Justin left his startup executive role in 2019 after suffering from burnout. Since then, he's made $8 million by helping creators and entrepreneurs become successful solopreneurs. And I've taken his course, Creator MBA, and honestly, it's one of the highest insight per minute courses that I've ever taken. So welcome, Justin.
Thanks, man. Peter, I appreciate you having me, and thanks for the kind words, and thanks for being a customer.
All right. So let's go back to, I think 2018, 2019. You were the VP of sales at a fast growing startup. You had 150 reports or something like that. So by all means, it's kind of like society's traditional definition of success, right? But like, when did you realize that you actually needed a change from that career path?
Yeah. Becoming like a VP of sales was sort of the upper echelon of what I wanted to reach in my career. And when I was a salesperson and then a manager and then a director, like that was the thing. That's what I wanted to be. And when I got there, I loved it. And, grew the team from just one sales guy to 150 salespeople. I had maybe 6 to 8 direct reports, but the team was big and the targets were big. And back in 2015 to 2019, when that was my life, it was the growth at all costs phase in startups. And so, every target got bigger, faster, the stakes got higher, and it got more nerve wracking, right? Like I hit, I think 16 quarters in a row of my target, even though they were massively big. And people think that burnout comes from working really hard or working too hard or working too long. And I don't actually think that's why burnout happens. I can work hard for a long period of time, as can a lot of people. I think burnout starts to happen when you lose control. And so I often kind of bring up this example where if you've played Tetris before, as the levels get harder and harder, the pieces start falling faster and faster, and you have to make moves much faster. And when you mess up a move, it compounds very quickly because the pieces just start stacking on top of one another really fast. And that is what it's like when you start to feel out of control at a company or in your role. When like you make a mistake and one mistake becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 16, becomes 190, like it just multiplies, right? And it multiplies fast. And so I knew that I needed a break because I coped with burnout in the same way that a lot of people do, which is I ate too much, I drank too much, I didn't exercise very much, I didn't get much sleep, I wasn't a great husband, I wasn't paying attention to my family. And that all sort of culminated in this panic attack that I had in December of 2018, which was like, if you've never had one, it sounds silly, like a panic attack, but it was like a pretty meaningful day of my life where I didn't really know what was happening. I thought I was dying. And that was the day that I knew that I needed to make a change. And I had a conversation with my bosses the following Monday, and they were super receptive and understanding. And I ended up staying for another 8 months and getting myself back into mental and physical shape.
Got it. And it's kind of like a big leap to make, right? Because you've kind of made it as VP of sales. And for you to tell your boss that actually, I don't want to become SVP or CEO. I just want to make a change. But I guess when you actually, go to the hospital or something, it's kind of like it's kind of like a wake up call.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like I had aspirations of becoming a chief revenue officer. It actually happened. I went back to the company a year later. I was rehired to be the chief revenue officer. So I was able to sort of check that box in my career, which was really nice. And I helped them navigate growing the company through COVID. But I got lucky in a weird way. And the way that I got lucky was I was forced. Like a lot of people sit around and they think about like, should I, grow my side hustle? Should I become an entrepreneur? Should I leave my job? Like I didn't have a choice. I had backed myself into a corner physically and mentally. And the only choice I had was to take a break. And in a weird way, that was like a very lucky thing to happen to me because it's like, that was the only option I had. So I had to take it and it made it a lot easier.
Got it. So I think, tech industry goes through these ups and downs. And I think many tech people are feeling burnout right now. Either they're like, they lost their job already, or you know how this stuff goes. Like you could be doing well at your company and then they want to do cost cutting and then you get laid off. But, I think a lot of people still have mortgages to pay. They live in the Bay Area. What's your advice for folks who are thinking about doing this or trying to take back control a little bit?
Yeah, it's a phased approach. Right. I think there's a lot of I think people talk about media propaganda. I think everything is propaganda. So if you go out and you read, internet gurus, propaganda. It's all about like working 4 hours a day on the beach or like whatever it might be. Right. And like, sure. Can you eventually reach that if you put in many years? Maybe. But like the truth and the reality and the authentic way to sort of make it and to gradually gain back some control is just what I said. It's gradual. And so the first thing that you can do is figure out just like, how might you get a little bit of attention online? And maybe it's not even online, right? Maybe it's local. Maybe it's online is not the only game. It's the biggest game. And so like, how might you get a little bit of attention? And if you can find 15 extra minutes every day to think about attention and to put yourself out there and to share the knowledge and the skills that you've accumulated over the course of your career or your hobbies or things that you like doing in your free time, that's a great start, right? Figure out like, what does it mean to market oneself? Because so many people are smart. They have awesome business ideas. They've got great products. They've got great services, but they can't communicate. And in the end, communicating your value is the thing that matters the most. So I would practice that. I would practice that for a long time until you get really good at it. And once you get good at communicating your value and sharing your expertise and your knowledge, that is when you can start, making a little bit of extra money, doing a little coaching, maybe building a product, maybe you have a micro SaaS consulting business. And as you get traction, you're going to start growing over time. And once you have reached a certain threshold, maybe you're 60 to 70% of your take home earnings, getting 40 hours a week back, you're likely to continue to grow. And so think of it as a phased, gradual approach over many years. And just because you see someone who did it faster doesn't mean that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, in some ways, it's almost good to, do a couple of years while having your main job. Because, if you just quit without having the income, you're going to put a ton of pressure on yourself. And it's going to be pretty stressful, right? So
that's right. That's right. People see that I went on social media about 8 months before I quit, right? I had this panic attack and then I started writing online because I was like, okay, if I'm going to quit my job, I have to got to do something, right? I didn't know what else to do other than maybe I would go talk about my expertise. But I had timing on my side. I did it in 2018, back before the platform that I chose, LinkedIn, was even a popular place to write, right? So I got luck, timing. Don't follow my path and hope that you have the same luck and timing that I do. Follow a more gradual phased approach and don't attempt to be an outlier. Try and be the person that thinks in the long game and takes their time and has patience.
Another thing that I think you're really good at is you create systems and stuff. And one of your systems is how to use your time more effectively, which is, I think, very relevant for people who want to start side hustles, right? So can you talk about the steps that you go through? Think about where you spend your time.
Yeah. I mean, it's not too complicated. Effectively, the way that I think about spending time is you should probably, like anything around the Pareto principle, is you should probably be spending your time doing the 20% of things that maximize 80% of your intended outcome. And that outcome may not be making money. It might be growing a social media audience. It might be, something else, spending more time on your hobbies. But what I generally do is I start by picking an intended outcome, right? So you might say my intended outcome is to grow my business revenue, right? And so once you know that you want to grow your business revenue, all you do is you take a look at your week. And this is what I do. Something I do generally quarterly is I'll just lay out my week and I'll say, all right, inside of any given week, what are every task that I do during the week, right? So if I think about tasks that I do, there's I write my newsletter, I think of ideas, I create content, I create my templates, I edit the newsletter, I send it, I do podcasts, I help people do login issues, I set up tracking on my social media stuff, I book sponsors, I find affiliates. There's a million little tasks, right? That fall, to me to accomplish, or at least they used to. And so once you have all those tasks out, you just look and say, all right, how much time do I spend on these tasks, right? Do I spend an hour, 2 hours, 30 minutes, so on and so forth? And then you basically say, all right, on a scale of whatever, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, you pick the scale. How do these tasks align with the intended impact that I'm trying to have? I might say scheduling a podcast interview back and forth on email. If you tie that to generating revenue for my business, it's a 1 out of 10, right? Sending making sure that my newsletter is high quality, it's probably a 9 out of 10. So you just kind of assign value to each of these tasks. And what you're left with is an assigned value from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 or however you want to rank it. And then you've got an hourly amount of time that you spend each week. And then you have ratios. You simply divide those into one another and each thing gets a number, right? And what you're trying to do is say, all right, I got 60 tasks. If I have 60 tasks, I'm going to do the top 20% are the top 12, right? So list those out in order from 1 to 60. So what are the top 12? That's probably where you should spend your time. Or if you want to say it's 50, it's the top 10, right? That's where you should spend your time. Everything else should have one of three sort of things tethered to it. It should either be simplified or eliminated. First, go through and eliminate the bottom stuff, right? Like what's the stuff that is not important at all? Eliminate it, get rid of it. After that, it's like, okay, what are some things that are really complex that could be simplified? And if you can simplify those, will they take up significantly less time and therefore have a better ratio number? Next up, can you automate something with a tool, AI, automated tools, Zapier, whatever it might be? And then can you delegate things? And so I do this quarterly and I'm left with the things that I should do, the things that I can automate, delegate, eliminate, and simplify. And that keeps me on target for the things I should be working on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think like additional wrinkle is like some of these things could be like very high value for generating revenue, but like you just hate doing it. Like,
sure.
like, I don't know, like trying to find sponsors or like, teach a bunch of live courses on the weekends. So then
totally.
You might want to try to dedicate or automate some of that still, right? It's like,
certainly. Yeah. And like when I go through the process, it's like any process, there's nuance to the process. So like if you look at your top 10, you're like, man, I hate doing one of these things. Cool. It's not a steadfast rule, right? You don't have to be like, oh, unfortunately I have to do these 10 things. Like, okay, you hate it. You're going to do 9 out of the top 10 things and you're going to outsource that one thing, or you're going to automate that one thing, or God forbid, you're going to eliminate it. So it's not steadfast, but it helps you get a sense of where you should be spending your time.
Got it. Okay. So now let's talk about finding your niche and like crafting your unique value prop. By the way, that's like probably my favorite part of your course. Yeah. I think it's probably the most important part. So people keep talking about, gotta find a niche. How can people figure out, what problem other people are willing to pay them for? Like, how do you even start thinking about this? Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways, right? So like, I'm certainly not the authority on telling people how to find their niche, although I think I'm pretty good at it. So I'll share 4 ways that you can think through it. And again, it's not an exhaustive list. I'm sure someone listening will say, oh, I have a 5th or a 6th way. And that's awesome. Again, I'm not the authority, but one way is just pretty simple. It's your practical experience and it's your credibility. So what have you done at work? Right? Like, for example, I was a VP of sales and a sales leader for, I think 16 years, right? So that was pretty easy. So the first thing that I did when I quit my job was I didn't become the creator that I am today. I built a consulting business helping healthcare startups grow, because that's what I'd done for 16 years. So it was like easy transition, right? So one way is practical experience and credibility. Another one is just what I might call like a learned obsession. It's that thing that you don't do for a living, but you're completely obsessed with. So I pivoted over time. I went from helping healthcare startups grow to becoming a creator and maybe what you might call like digital marketing, for lack of a better description, right? And solopreneurship and things like that. I was obsessed with that. I never did it as a career up until me doing it now. But like I was reading every book, I was listening to every podcast, I was reading every blog post I could find. I was tinkering with tools. I was doing marketing on the side, creating content, lead magnets, webinars, everything, right? Because I was super obsessed with that. And that was an obsession that I just learned. And since I learned it over time, I became an expert without having, traditional experience or having it in my title at work or anything like that. So that's another thing that you can do. And a lot of times people are obsessed with something that's completely unrelated to their job. The third thing that you can look at is just, what do people come to you for advice for? Like, we all have family and friends that come and they say, oh, Peter's really good at X, or man, Justin, I was thinking about you because I have this one problem and I know like you're the guy who can solve this thing. And maybe you're good at 3 things, right? But it's like, keep your eyes and ears open for those things. We're in such a fast-paced world. We're moving so quickly. We're not paying attention to much. We're consuming and creating. We often don't stop and like pause and be cognizant of the things that people are coming to us for help for. And those can be really awesome things to build a small side hustle on. And last is just problems you've solved for yourself. So like right now I have a problem in my business and I'm actively solving it. And as I solve that problem, I'm like, this is a cool product. This is a cool service. Like, if I'm having this problem, how many other creators are having this problem and would pay a lot of money to solve it? And so I'm thinking about that as a product and service because I'm fixing a problem that I have myself. So those are like 4 ways that I might approach solving a problem.
Got it. And how do you, because like it's just kind of like building a product and bringing it to the market, right? Like how do you validate this with real customers as soon as possible, as opposed to try to build something and then realize people don't want this? I guess it's kind of an obvious answer, but like, how do you go about it?
It's obvious to me, or and maybe you, but that doesn't mean it's obvious to everyone. 5 years ago, I would have said, I have no idea, right? Mm-hmm. But to me, my inclination is to actually help them on your own, one-on-one, right? So it's like identify 5 to 10 people who have those problems, have those aspirations, and want to work with you, right? And are they willing to put some skin in the game? And the amount doesn't matter. It's just, are they willing to spend money and time to solve the problem that you solve them, to reach the aspirational stage that they want to reach? And if you can do that, what you do is you validate that A, they'll spend the money, B, they'll spend the time, C, they'll show up and they'll do the work. And then D, you'll help them reach the intended outcome that you told them that you would help them reach. If you can do those 4 things, then you have at least a viable framework of a business, right? If nobody's willing to spend money and nobody's willing to spend time, then you have an idea, but you don't have a business, right? And so once you do that, what I would do is I would try and wrap that into a process, because I would imagine that if you have 5 guys and gals, there are going to be commonalities amongst all of them. And as you help them work through this problem or process, you will see all those commonalities. Those commonalities become a framework, right? So that as you bring more people in, you're like, I know the 5 things we got to nail in order to let them reach their outcome, to overcome their pain points. And then you turn that into a process as a service business where you can continue to work one-on-one with people. Once you've validated that there is more interest in the market and that your solution actually works, productize it. Raise your rates on your service side, lower the rates on the product side. For those people who don't want to spend a lot of money to do work one-on-one with you, let them work through a self-paced product. Those people who want hand-holding and want to spend time with you one-on-one, they've got the service business. This is exactly how I started my business.
Yeah, it does seem like a pretty surefire path. It's just like, when I think services business is like a lot more meetings and one-on-ones, but I think you just have to do it. Yeah. It's like building a product. You just got to talk to customers one-on-one and figure out what they want. Yeah.
It's like saying, I really want to build a product, but talking with customers sounds like a lot of time. Like it is.
Yeah.
But it's important, right? So like, I think you hear a lot about these startup founders who want to build something. I'm just going to make up an example, right? Like they want to build something in like supply chain, right? And they go and they spend like 100 hours on the Amazon distribution centers or in the supply chain place where they're doing like, manual labor to try and understand the pain. Like you got to live it before you can solve it.
Yeah. I think there was a step in your process that you skipped. I just want to bring it back, which is create a movement and find an enemy or someone to fight. Maybe you can give some examples of that from you or from your friends like Dan or other folks. Yeah,
totally. So that's more on the marketing side, right? So like, I don't think you need that to validate a business necessarily, but if you want to go out and you want to grow that business, you have to market. And so marketing is a lot like politics. And so I'll give you kind of an example. If you look at American politics, and I'm not going to go down a political rabbit hole or either party, I don't care about any of that stuff. Like just pick either party, right? Very rarely do they tell you all the good things that they do. Instead, most of the focus is on the bad things that the other party or candidate or person does, right? They're creating an enemy. And if you think about some marketing talk, like there's a famous quote, and I'll probably mess it up, which is like, you want to help people throw rocks at their enemies. I think it was Blair Warren who said that. And he's like kind of an old school marketer. And throwing rocks at your enemies is like, you want to pick a target. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be a mantra. It could be a movement. It could be an ideology that you are 100% against, right? And so for example, in your example, like you're against the idea of the traditional career path. Like to become a better engineer, you do not need to lead people. You do not need to grow teams. You want to be a better engineer, build better product, right? Build a career building the best product possible. So the reverse of that is your enemy, right? And once you have an enemy, you can build a movement because movements are built by defeating another enemy. So for example, I'll give you an example from my business. I talk about solopreneurship, right? Is solopreneurship right for everybody? It isn't. I'm very, very candid about that. I'm very clear about that. But I also won't tell someone they shouldn't try, I'm not a babysitter, right? I think adults should do whatever they want to do. My enemy is the traditional career and life path where you work for a company until they don't need you anymore and you get fired, and you do that for 60 years, hoping you can save enough for retirement. And we know from the average American, they can't. That sounds like a shitty life to me, right? So like, that's the enemy. And I throw rocks at that enemy all the time. And by throwing rocks at that enemy, I am building a movement. And the movement is that over here, we've got a group of solopreneurs who are taking control of their life, taking control of their time, and taking control of their freedom, right? A guy like Dan Go, a buddy of mine, the stereotype, and that stereotype is getting broken much faster by a lot more people of like, as an entrepreneur, you shouldn't be so busy that you're out of shape, right? You should be in the best shape of your life. Like the way that you treat your body should translate into how you treat your business and your family and the type of person that you are. Whether that's true or not, right? That is the movement that guys like Dan Go, a buddy of mine, is building. And by the way, I don't want to speak for Dan. That might not be exactly his movement, but that's sort of how I see it. And his enemy is, the entrepreneur who's letting themselves go, who's not keeping themselves in shape, who, says they'll do anything for their family, but they're not getting in shape for their family. That's his enemy, right? And so I think by having these two sort of juxtaposing things, the enemy and the movement, you can market a lot more effectively. And that's part of what marketing is.
Yeah, it does. I'm not going to talk about either party, but with the politics stuff, like one of my big frustrations is like they just keep talking shit about each other. They don't actually talk about what they're going to do for the country if they get elected.
Tell me what you'll do for me. That's right. Tell me what you did for me. But that doesn't sell, man. Unfortunately, by the way.
Yeah,
I wish it did.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Okay. So after you've crafted a really good, unique value proposition and when you talk to a bunch of customers, you validate it, people maybe pay you some money for it. You have this really simple funnel to actually get attention and to, get people to actually like build relationships and actually spend on your product. Maybe we can talk about it just at a really high level first.
Yeah, sure. I keep it simple because I think most marketing is overcomplicated. Not all marketing, by the way. I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush. There are certainly, times and situations that call for complex marketing. But for the most part, there's the old school marketing funnel, right? I think it's awareness, idea. I can't even remember. Awareness, something, decision, action, right? I can't even remember because I don't really follow that one. I follow my own. So mine's a little bit different, right? It's get discovered, build trust, deepen relationships, and monetize. Very simple. So I'll kind of talk about it from a high level, right? So the top of the funnel is just called getting discovered. And so getting discovered simply means getting your name, your face, your brand, what you do, who you help, your knowledge in front of as many people as possible, right? As many people as possible, because you want people to resonate with your message. You want them to have an opportunity to hook on to your movement, to join you in throwing rocks at the enemy, to share it with their friends who say, hey, Jim, this sounds a lot like what you were telling me about, man. You should follow this guy, right? Getting discovered is huge. And that is all organic social. So organic social to me is all about getting discovered. And so that's why I'm very active on platforms like LinkedIn, like X, like Instagram, like Threads. I just try and get top of funnel discovery all the time. My goal is like hundreds of millions of impressions every single year. Getting discovered in and of itself is not enough, right? You have to, it's the eyeing, the AIDA is interest, right? But to me, less about interest, it's more about trust. So after getting discovered, I want to build trust. And I don't mean trust like, you leave me at home to babysit your kids or watch your house or anything like that. That's not the kind of trust that I'm talking about. The kind of trust that I'm talking about is like, I trust this person is really good at what they do. I trust this person is not just lip service, that they're actually an expert in the things they say they're an expert in. And the easiest way, in my opinion, today to show trust or to build trust is long form content. And so long form content can be written content, a newsletter, a blog, a lengthy article. It can be video, right? A robust YouTube video that takes someone from point A to point B in 25, 30 minutes. Like these are a podcast, right? Where you're breaking down complex topics and making them really simple. These are all opportunities to build trust. If you can get discovered and build trust, you're in a pretty good position to take the people who want the thing that you have, trust you're the right person, and make some money at a business, right? Mm-hmm. If you sell something very expensive, there's probably another step. The next step would be deepening the relationship. And that's why I think a lot of like enterprise level companies, a lot of high ticket sellers with really expensive stuff benefit greatly from events, communities, things where like people are getting access to them in real time and they're deepening that tie. They're strengthening that bond. They're really going deep on this relationship because we buy from people we know and like. So if you sell something that's $1,000, you got to deepen that relationship. And by the way, 1,000 is an arbitrary number. That might be inexpensive to a company and expensive to an individual person, but hopefully you get the point, right? Whereas if you sell something low ticket, $50, you might not need to deepen that relationship. After building trust, you might be ready to present your offer. You might say, hey, you've read all my stuff on LinkedIn. You've consumed all my newsletters and articles. You've checked out all my long form videos. Are you ready to work with someone to solve your problem? This thing's $50 or $99. Like, they might be ready to pull the trigger right then. So it's discovery, trust, relationship, monetization.
Got it. And what are some ways that you've kind of optimized this funnel that had kind of like a step function change in your business? Or is it just a matter of showing up every day and like doing the work?
Yeah, it's mostly the latter, right? But there are certainly some ways that I've gotten better at it. So I'll give you an example of how I've sort of fine-tuned it, for lack of a better description. So let's start with the top, getting discovered. Well, getting discovered is a function of the value and quality of the piece of content that you create. So I've created probably 5,000 pieces of unique content over the last 5 years, and there's new AI tools out there. So what's the first thing that I want to do? I want AI to analyze the thousands of things that I've created and tell me, what is it about the top 50 that are similar, right?
Yeah.
What should I be trying to do to maximize getting discovered? So often what I think is, if you want to improve impressions, it's the opening, the hook, right? The opening and the hook kind of drive impressions. If you want to drive engagement, it's the body, it's the call to conversation. Those things drive comments, reshares, like the information. How good is it, right? Outside of the hook, like after the hook, did you deliver, right? That stuff drives the engagement, drives the comments, drives the retweets and the reshares. So like I'll look for commonalities amongst those things. And what I'm trying to craft, Peter, is like the perfect post. What does the perfect post look like that drives both impressions and engagement, right? And then I'll look at a ratio of impressions to clicks to my website. So like, what percentage of people that saw this thing clicked through and went to the article that I recommended? And when I get these ratios, I can see, okay, just because something had 1 million hits and drove 1,000 people to my website, that's good. But what about something that only had 100,000 hits that drove 1,000 people to my website? That's a better call to action. I got a larger percentage of people to my site. And so I'll look at the commonalities in those things. I'll have AI break those down, say, what was it about this call to action that you think drove a bunch of people to my website? Again, I'm trying to have the perfect post. Mm-hmm. So once you've got the perfect post down, it's like, okay, I know the hook's good. I know the body's good. I know the call to conversation's good. I know the link to my website's going to work. Cool. We're getting them to the point where I'm starting to build trust. So I'm sending them to some article on my website. Certain articles work better than others. So the same ratio. How many people read an article versus make a purchase? If someone reads an article and 10% of them make a purchase on this article, or they read this other article and 2% of people make the purchase, the first article is 5 times more valuable, right? So how do I create more articles like that? So now I've got the perfect post, hook, body, call to conversation, link to my website, the right article. This is a well-optimized funnel where I know when I stitch these things together and I hit post, it's going to lead to a lot of revenue. Those are the small and nuanced things that I do to make sure that the business is growing.
And you have to be like somewhat analytical with this stuff, right? So like, how do you, like one struggle I have is like, my newsletters on one platform, the social stuff is on like these social platforms. Like I have to freaking like make a manual spreadsheet of this funnel and try to figure it out myself.
Yeah.
Do you have any like tools or something that you use, or just use spreadsheets?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, man, like, I use publishing tools like most people. I use Taplio, I use Tweet Hunter, and they have built-in analytics, right? So I can export that stuff very quickly. I've got website analytics from Fathom Analytics, like that stuff, again, exported very quickly. So generally what I do, and I've got, purchase history from Kajabi. So like I export those 3 things. I put them into one spreadsheet. I upload them to something like Claude or ChatGPT, and I'm like, give me a breakdown. Help me understand, like, what are the posts? What are the articles? Like, well, what is it that works? That used to be all manual, but today there's no need with all the new tools.
Yeah, the AI is really good at doing this stuff, like summarizing a bunch of information and like getting you to takeaways. That's probably what it's best at. So yeah.
Yeah. So many people are like leveraging AI to like write comments and like write posts and write newsletters. And it's like, dude, there's such a better way to use it right now. It's like, keep your creativity, let it manage the data.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been awesome so far. I just have, let's talk about one more topic.
Sure.
If you don't mind. Yeah,
sure.
So I think this is kind of an eye opener for me, like you have the saying about creating stacked offers, and there's kind of two paths that you talk about. One is like, just like growing your audience as big as possible. Another path is much more specific and much more strategic. And, as someone who has like posted these memes that have got like 1,000,000+ views, but like so nothing, like I'm very cognizant of this. So maybe talk about these two paths and like why you recommend this other path.
Yeah. There's the path of like being very specific, and there's the path of being very viral and generic. And so, by the way, no path is wrong. It's just how can you harness the power of each path? Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. And by the way, just because I say this person is in this path, like doesn't necessarily mean that they are. I am really specific on solopreneurship. Dan Go is really specific on helping founders get their time back and build their best bodies. Like we talk about the same stuff every single day, all the time, right? So as you grow your audience, the audience that you're growing is specific, right? And so as you grow a specific audience, your options are more plentiful, right? So you can do things like create a micro offer as you get a little bit bigger. You're testing the waters. Will your audience spend money with you? If they do, let's say they spend, my first product was $50. If they spend $50, can you deliver $50,000 of value and like set the stage for a deep future relationship for the next decade, right? You have that option. A few years later, you could do a core product as your audience grows and maintains specificity, right? Then if you keep growing like me, you get to a million followers, 1.5 million across a few platforms, you can drop your high ticket offer like I did with the Creator MBA, because I've been on beating the same drum for so long. And then eventually could probably do something even higher ticket. The reverse of that is when you don't have a specific audience, when your audience is relatively generic, when you're talking about things like just general productivity, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Productivity in and of itself is a thing, but there are so many different types of productivity. It can get so much more niche than that. And so what happens is you might have a harder time as your audience grows, establishing that exactly what should that micro offer be when you're just systems, productivity, like what is the micro offer? How do you build that? How do you say, I'm the exact right person to solve this very specific problem for you when what you've been talking about is broad, right? It becomes much more difficult. So I think those people have a longer path to monetization, but when they get to the end of that path, they might be able to have a bigger payback. So let's take someone like James Clear, for example. James Clear made some money on his way to becoming an author, but Atomic Habits was his moneymaker, right? Yeah. It took him a decade of building a massive audience around habits, which is a pretty broad topic. And then he dropped a 5 times New York Times bestseller, right? But it probably took him a really long time to get there. Whereas other people along the way might be more gradual in creating those businesses. Now, caveat to all this, there are of course outliers in both camps. Those who have been specific and never been able to build offers the way up, and those who have been broad and have built, plenty of offers on the way up. It's not a steadfast rule. It's not black and white. It is more likely to follow one of those two paths.
It does take discipline to follow the more narrow path. Because you mostly speak about solopreneurship. And I tend to like just tweet random shit. Like it's entertaining to use Twitter, right? So like, totally. So I need to, maybe talk to my family more or something instead of like talking to just random online people.
Yeah, I think like in the end of the day, like there's an example in my course where I remember, I'm actually going to pull it up because it's a really good example. So just give me a split second. Because I want to read to you this thing that I went through back in the day with my company. So as myself and the CEOs were building our company, we at some point wanted to invest in SEO for the business because we had built a really big sales team. We were getting a ton of leads, but it was time for us to actually go out and like invest in proper SEO. So we went out and we interviewed a bunch of people. And this is basically what we heard, right? We interviewed one young lady and she said like, oh, I do SEO for companies. And you're like, okay. Next person was like, I help companies do better SEO. And you're like, all right, sounds about the same. I've been working in SEO for companies like yours for a decade. all like super generic. I do SEO. I help companies with SEO. I've been working in SEO for a decade. Then we had this guy come along, right? And this guy basically said something like this. We're a healthcare company. Old school SEO tactics don't work in the crowded healthcare space, especially for early stage companies without a lot of traction. Over the last 5 years, I've built a new approach for healthcare SEO that lets up and coming companies compete with the entrenched healthcare businesses at a fraction of the price. Now new companies in the space can compete more quickly and with a smaller budget. Is that worth a conversation? Like, of course, right? How much more aligned and relevant can that pitch be than I do SEO for companies like yours? And so the reason that I share this is because you can hear the relevance, you can hear the specificity, and 100% of people would choose to work with that person or bring that person in to interview for the job. And we don't think about that when we're creating our content, when we're building our brands. We're trying to be entertaining and get the most likes. It's like, no, be that guy. Be the guy who solves a very specific problem that's painful for a very specific company or person.
Yeah, it's just a matter. It's also just a matter of putting a little bit more effort into your outreach, right? It's like he actually did some research on what you guys did. They provide some value upfront.
Totally. But also when people on social media go to read your tweets and your profile, like they can't just find funny memes. They better find stuff that's aligned with what you just pitched, right?
Yes.
And that's why creating content that's specific is important.
All right, I'll try to make my memes more specific. That's what I'll try.
Nice.
Cool. I have two more questions. I notice a lot of tech people, when they try to transition to the solopreneurship path, they teach these like high ticket core courses, right? Like this live core courses that charge $1,000. But like you're like one of the few careers that actually made like these low ticket courses or like $150 or now $500 and actually kind of scaled. There's this concept of like selling stuff while you sleep. But yeah, I'm not sure if that's true or like you chose this path because it's like more scalable or, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple different reasons.
Yeah.
I think I chose this path first off because like cohort-based courses were not really a thing when I started. Like no one had built Maven. Like it just wasn't popular the way that it's popular now, or at least, more popular. So I didn't think of it as an option, number one. Number two, when I built my first kind of little bit of my brand, I really wanted to decouple time from earnings. I had made money as a consultant for a year. I was working 40-hour weeks and 50-hour weeks of like meetings, right? Just like tons and tons of meetings. So like the idea of going on and doing these presentations, I didn't love that. So I thought to myself, like, can I automate this? Like, if I make this more affordable, is this a win for both me and the customer? And I wanted to test a hypothesis that like, I can make it cheap, I can make it valuable, and the word of mouth alone would spread a lot about what I was doing. And I proved that hypothesis to be right, at least for me. Again, that may not be right for everybody, but I didn't want to spend the time. I just wanted to decouple time from revenue.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, man. Last question. So let's go back to our tech professional profile. A lot of people are saying, these pretty comfortable jobs, right? They're making like $500,000 or something. And like they have big mortgages and maybe they just send their kids to private school. And what do you have to like, do you have any closing words of advice for these folks in terms of either solopreneurship or just like your previous life as a tech executive? You have any?
Yeah, I do. My goal is not to convert people. I'm not interested in making solopreneurs out of people who aren't interested in doing it or don't feel comfortable with it. That's never been my intention. My intention is simply to educate them that there's an option, to show them, to lay the options at their feet and say, there are other ways to make a living. So what I would do is I would encourage them to think deeply about what gets them motivated as a person. Is it working with teams, solving big complex challenges? Like if that gets them out of bed in the morning, then awesome, stay at the company. That's great. Like be aware of how companies work, right? You should be cognizant enough to know that in most people's career at some point in time, they find themselves on the wrong end of a layoff. All you have to do is be aware of that, right? So if you're the kind of person who likes working with big teams, who likes having built-in vacation, who enjoys having health insurance, who, likes the comfortable feeling of a 9-to-5 job, whether it's comfortable or not, like we could argue that back and forth. Like if you like that feeling, have a job. At the same time, be smart enough to educate yourself about how the world is changing, how layoffs are happening, and invest a little bit of time in at least getting a megaphone every once in a while and letting people know you exist, right? Like,
Yeah.
build out your profiles, share your knowledge, because if you do get laid off and you've built a sizable network and people know you for something, it's just so much easier to become reemployed, right? It's when people are like, I got laid off and now I want to take LinkedIn seriously, or I want to start writing on Twitter. That's the worst time. You're already under a lot of pressure, right? So like, if you've already done that before, then you're in a much better situation. If you crave freedom, if you crave autonomy, if you like making decisions on your own and executing on the decisions that you've made, if your goal was eventually to be the owner of your time for, and of course you have customers and things like that. But if all those things sound like what you want and you're okay with the risk of not having health insurance or having expensive health insurance, not having a steady income every single day, week, or month or quarter, right? If those things don't scare you and you like the upside more than the downside, then it might make sense to at least start dabbling in that world. Get out. The same thing as the person who's staying on the job. Get out there, make yourself known, share your knowledge, share your skills, your expertise, all the unique things that you've learned. And at some point in time, especially if you get specific, start to experiment. Can you monetize a bit? And if you can monetize a bit, then you can monetize more. And if you can monetize more, you can monetize for a long period of time. So like, those are the ways that I would approach it, but there's no right answer for everyone.
It doesn't have to be like a burn the boats decision, right? You can just like
Correct.
get yourself out there and then you can decide what you want to do eventually. Yeah.
Burning the boats is the worst decision that you can make, in my opinion. So I would encourage them not to do that.
Okay. Well, I think everyone already knows this, but where can people find you online?
They can find me at justinwelsh.me. That's JUSTINWELSH.me. And they can subscribe to my newsletter, The Saturday Solopreneur. I send out one tip you can read in less than 4 minutes every Saturday morning.
All right, Justin. Thanks so much, man. I learned so much from this conversation.
Cool, man. Great questions. I appreciate you having me.
All right.
Great stuff. So now we can see how he's orchestrated his technology, his entire tech stack, to allow that content flows from one end of his business environment, from the ideas that he's created in Notion, synthesized all the way through to his scheduling application, created in his email generation application, and from there he's monetized all that information, or all that data rather, right? So what we can see that he's spoken about was the challenge of the 21st century is that we have to get discovered, right? And that's important. We have to work with people to ensure that they trust and like what we are putting out there, to ensure that we build what they want to have, right? And that's around so getting discovered firstly. Secondly, we have to build trust with our network, deepen that relationship by ensuring that those individuals that now trust us now want to have what we're creating. And then lastly, as mentioned, we're monetizing that relationship, but not doing so in a very robotic manner, doing it with authenticity. So we've got an opportunity. So we can see that the opportunity gap in South Africa is real, right? We've got unequal access to the internet. Contextualized training is limited to our businesses and to the communities in which we operate within. And one of the biggest challenges that we have is that our educational systems are not keeping pace with the aggressive rate of advancement that technology is taking place at. But once entrepreneurs receive structured, contextualized learning, capability development is rapid and non-linear. Right? Non-linear because we are beginning to learn from multiple different experiences as opposed to just assuming that because I've accessed or watched this video or listened to this podcast that now I know what I need to do. So you're not behind. I think right at the beginning of this module, we spoke about the fact that we are early into the process. And as entrepreneurs who build genuine digital capability, you're now positioning yourself to be ahead of the market and you're not catching up to it. So as we wrap up the module, I've got some key takeaways for you. The first is there are 5 competency areas associated to digital literacy. This is not just about how to use a smartphone, how to use WhatsApp, or how to use a search engine, but this is understanding how they can integrate with each other in order to help you make decisions for your business. The second is around the triad model and its progressive nature, right? Digital literacy is the foundation for data literacy, and data literacy is the foundation for AI literacy. And there's a critical shift taking place from technology utilization to technology orchestration, and how you are the conductor of your symphony across your business. And across the entire module, we spoke about how you think critically, how you develop your tech stack technically, and then lastly, how you build a mental model across every aspect of the different literacy models from a triad perspective, and that you'll see come through across the entire course of this program. And then lastly, we also can take away the fact that we are early to the game, right? We are not late, we are not behind, because 23% of South African entrepreneurs and 47% globally have sufficient digital capability in order to build their businesses. So there's a massive opportunity, right? We don't want to be part of the 23, we want to be part of the 67 or 77%. So you can see that we've got a big opportunity here. This is not our ceiling. At this juncture, let's pause and let's reflect. I've got 3 questions on screen. What I'd like you to do is to think of the 5 competency areas associated to digital literacy. You've already completed an assessment around where you see yourself. Now think about what your strongest is and what your weakest is. The second question is then about honestly placing yourself around how you utilize technology versus orchestrating technology. And what's holding you in either aspect of these 2 domains. Right? Once you've understood exactly what's holding you there, you'll understand how to exploit that anchor, or how you can remove that anchor and start setting course for orchestration. And then lastly, looking at the triad model, what's your strongest literacy and where is your biggest gap? Right, so as you reflect, I want you to pause the video, and when you come back, we'll jump into submodule 2, which is an introduction to artificial intelligence. Welcome back. Let's continue with submodule 2, an introduction to artificial intelligence. And in this module or submodule, we'll start discussing some of the core concepts, its capabilities, and also some critical limitations that are baked into artificial intelligence that fail. Sometimes we just don't recognize that they're failing because it still appears as if it's factual, it appears as if it's true, because of the slick nature in which the prediction model that's baked into AI has sort of put the right words next to each other. All right. So I want you to understand that as we jump into the submodule, that AI is a tool, it's not magic. And this submodule builds the mental model that you need to use in order to extract value from it. Right. It's not a replacement, and I think this is the most important sort of concept that I want us to understand as we go through this segment, is that AI is not a replacement for your thinking. It's a powerful tool that works well only if you understand how to use it. So let's run through some of the key objectives that you're going to take away from this segment. We're going to explain how to use large language models in simple and plain language in order to generate an output. I want you to build a mental model of AI that includes its capabilities, its limitations, as well as its failure modes. We're going to apply the 3 dimensions as we discussed in submodule 1 around how to evaluate AI outputs in and for your business. So we'll unpack exactly what the technical aspects of AI are, the critical thinking aspects around how you need to remain the thinking partner, and then lastly, the communicative, cognitive responsibilities, how you build a mental model to understand the prediction engine that AI has, as opposed to that you cannot relinquish your judgment, right? And then the 4th learning objective for today is then identifying and countering the 5 misconceptions and common misconceptions about artificial intelligence, and then lastly, explain how AI functions as a capacity equalizer. And I'm very excited about this one for South African entrepreneurs. So using AI and understanding AI are 2 fundamentally different things. I'm sure you've already used ChatGPT or Meta AI that's embedded or baked into WhatsApp, or Gemini, or Claude, and for some of us that might use that as well. And the difference here is that we are either utilizing it or we are orchestrating it, right? So I'm going to be pulling on a lot of these so let me pause there. As we've uncovered in submodule 1 around data literacy, we've understood that these literacies, digital data and AI, are all progressive in their nature. So I'll be referring back to elements from submodule 1 as we go through this entire program. Right. So from an AI perspective, what are the technical elements that we need to understand? Right. AI is trained on information. It's trained on content that we've created across the web. It's trained on reams and reams of data, posts, on videos, on podcasts. It's trained on information that's freely available on the open web and continues to learn from content that we post on social media. It continues to learn from information that we put into these large language models, especially if we're using the free versions. It's slightly different if you're using a paid-for version. But this information that we put out is factual, and in some cases, it's not factual. And therefore, that creates this failure mode in AI that allows information, or the output rather, to be fabricated, because it consumes both factual information and non-factual information. So information that we create is computed, but at the same time, also information that our businesses create get computed, right? And because we publish information about our businesses, or some registered organizations on JSE, as an example, publish information for investor relations purposes, and AI can consume that information, like an investor relations presentation or an economist presentation about a particular organization. And AI can then consume that, compute that, and create a prediction model around how that information gets surfaced to yourself when you prompt the large language model, right? So that's essentially what I want you to understand about the technical aspects of AI. It's trained on data that is freely available on the internet. And at the same time, when you prompt it for an output, it's not thinking, it's not understanding, but it's reasoning to predict one word after the other. All right. From a critical thinking perspective, it, as I just mentioned, right, it cannot think. It simply predicts. It predicts the next word. It does not understand. And I want you to take a moment and maybe potentially ask your potential chatbot that you use, or your preferred chatbot that you use on a regular basis. So whip out your phone and ask a question and have a look at the output. It's probably going to be very enthusiastic about its response to you. And it's going to say, I'm thrilled, I am, something of that nature. But it won't tell you when it's incorrect. It won't tell you that it doesn't understand, right? But what you must do, you must walk along its reasoning pathway. And in some cases, what you should do is you should ask it, please explain your reasoning pathway that you used in order to get to the output that I've asked you to get to. And in that way, it will then tell you exactly where it went looking for information, where it went to find sources that are either credible or not credible, sources that are real or not real. But if you don't ask it for its reasoning pathway, essentially you're sacrificing your thinking capability, so you're not thinking to give it information, and you're relinquishing your thinking potential by blindly interpreting what it says and what it provides you as gospel. And this is why it's important for us to understand that this prediction model that traverses millions of petabytes of information has to reason in order to produce an output. Then lastly, the final piece around AI literacy is around communicative cognitive. So we spoke previously about this, what this means. It's a mental model in understanding how it works so that you do the thinking. That's important, right? You do the thinking as opposed to allowing it to, because it cannot think, as we just learned. It reasons to sharpen your thinking so that you maintain and remain being the judge and the jury of the output. So prediction, not understanding, nor thinking. Right? Large language models are trained on enormous amounts of text, as we've just learned. They learn statistical patterns at a much faster rate. And I think this is what's great about it, is that it learns these statistical patterns at a much faster rate than our brain or traditional applications like spreadsheets. There's a limited range of rows and columns that, Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets or Apple Numbers can compute. So that it learns statistical information at a much more aggressive and advanced rate than we can, which words tend to follow and which other words it should not follow in the required contexts. Right? And when you give it a question, or when you ask a question, the model is not thinking in the way that human beings do, but at the same time it does predict, given this prompt. It's going to think about what's the next probable word and what the next probable word after that would be. So thinking about AI like an extremely well-read person that's got no real-world experience, and I think that's probably the most important thing that I want to say about this slide here, is it's your co-pilot, your colleague, your team member that has no real-life, real-world experience, and it's your responsibility to educate it on what it means to work within your business. Right? So just like any other employee, you upskill, you train, you provide context, you give it KPIs, a performance monitoring and performance management framework. You're going to tell it exactly how to perform, right? You have to, you're going to tell the individual that you've hired how to perform, or you're going to hold yourself accountable to those standards as well. Why would we not want to do that for a thinking partner like a large language model or an AI agent? We want to do the exact same thing. So it's important to understand that because it pattern matches, it actually doesn't search for information. Right? So it's matching one word to the next word because that's what it's been trained on. It's been trained on the ability to reason, not to think, not to understand. So it will produce confident answers, but factually incorrect statements. There is a big probability around that happening. It can invent citations and statistics, and those names can sound very, very real. And then also it can present outdated information. So it's important that we reflect on these training biases. And I've got two examples that I want to take you through to really outline exactly what it means. And the first is very close to home, right? We've recently just seen that the AI policy for AI adoption in South Africa was withdrawn. And that is because it fabricated parts of the policy and used fake citations. Right? So on the previous slide, we saw that it can produce fake information and, it can invent citations. And that's exactly what happened in the South African government. And as a result of it, we had to withdraw that policy. So we've got a cause. So I spoke about the incident where it was withdrawn because of the fabrication. We've got a cause, the internal investigation that took place after publication, or not publication, but after it was gazetted for review. An investigation during that period identified listed references that were fake. What was the mechanism of failure? Right? It wasn't technology oriented. The mechanism of failure was that people did not understand the failure rate of AI, and they blindly accepted. So if you think of those three core competencies, they understood from a technical perspective, this thing can create information for us, but we didn't think critically about it. And we didn't understand, we didn't develop a mental model for how we remain the judge of the output. So that was the mechanism of failure, right? It was around critical thinking as well as around, having a mental model to ensure that we use AI safely in our businesses, or in this case, developing the AI policy. And then lastly, there's a lesson that we can learn from this here, that vigilant human oversight is absolutely required to ensure that we maintain trust in our businesses and trust in the way in which we deepen our relationships with our customers. The second example is around algorithmic bias, and how if we lack contextual awareness, that we surrender ourselves to the algorithms and think that the technology rather, is the problem, as opposed to how we've traditionally built data and used that data in order to make decisions for our business. I sort of captioned this as, if there's bias going into your business, there's going to be bias coming out of your business, right? And in that way, if there's bias going into your tech stack, going into your large language model, going into ChatGPT, it's going to be trained on that bias, and it's going to surface more bias in its outputs. And that's exactly what happened in this circumstance. We've got an automated resume sifter that has taken place here. So an organization has used a recruitment application or recruitment system in order to screen CVs and screen resumes from people that are applying for jobs in these different, in a particular organization, pardon me. And during the process, the AI model in the recruitment system has sifted through CVs and weeded out some individuals, and in some cases people with disabilities, people of a certain skin color or certain race background. And it's then created a shortlist that was riddled with bias around who was traditionally hired in these roles. And because there was nobody hired in the particular role with a disability, if there was someone that identified in the bank of CVs that had a disability, that person was removed from the shortlist. And likewise, when it comes to race, the same discriminatory bias was built in, because the people that traditionally were hired into the successful role were of a particular race, and therefore anybody not of that race group was then removed from the shortlist. And this is currently ongoing as we speak with a particular law firm where the investigation has gone into discriminatory bias, and it's currently underplay. So what's important here is that AI models do not understand what fairness is and what ethics is, right? As we mentioned, it can reason, but it can reason against a knowledge base that it is being trained on. They strictly identify and replicate statistical patterns within their training data sets. And if historical data contains human prejudices and contains rules that we create, all the AI does, then it codifies as objective rules and delivers against those rules, because that's what you ultimately want. And that's why it's important that from a mental model point of view, we understand and we build a rule within our thinking when using AI, that we remain the judge. Right, so I want to jump into a few mechanisms and a few ways, some of them of which you're currently using, but I want to jump into a few ways around how we can equalize the use of AI for small business tasks. The first is around text generation and drafting. Oftentimes, I know in my business, what I don't want to spend a lot of time doing is drafting documents, because I want to spend a lot of time selling, right? I want to spend a lot of time prospecting. I want to spend a lot of time in activities that help me generate revenue, as opposed to activities that are admin related, that don't lead to a revenue generating activity. And some of that is, generating text and drafting documentation, right? So if we orchestrate or run a small e-commerce store, we could use AI to help us generate text for product descriptions, to auto-generate WhatsApp replies, and creating proposals. So I know I use it particularly to create proposals, because that's in connection with, drafting, revenue generating activities. Secondly, is around research and summarization, right? Summarizing documents, explaining complex topics in a very simple manner, and using applications like Notebook LM to conduct research in a particular domain, so that we uncover a niche aspect of the market that we want to chase and run after, right? And I particularly like that. We'll jump into Notebook LM a bit later today, where we really unpack exactly how we can create a small knowledge base that we can conduct research on, and help us identify what aspect of the market we can chase after and we can run after in order to carve a particular vector for ourselves, right? Thirdly, we've got translation and simplification. And this helps us, especially in an environment where we've got multiple different languages. So translation from one South African language to the next, or if we are embarking on globally expanding our business, translating our products from English into Dutch, or from English to Arabic. Just recently, I had an opportunity to convert material in video format from English to Afrikaans. And it was really fascinating to see an Afrikaans dialect come through with an American accent. So that was quite fascinating for me to see. And then simplification, that goes hand in hand with translation, right? Simplifying legal documentation or financial documentation. Oftentimes we're not necessarily trained on understanding the tax laws and tax regulations, and using AI to simplify the language so that we can build a system that helps us manage our tax and financial information or legal documentation, like non-disclosure agreements and things of that nature, in a very, very consumable format. Fourthly, brainstorming and ideation. And I think this does not just associate to creating a name for your business if you don't have one already, but typically we would use it to create different names, to ideate around certain marketing ideas or marketing aspects. Frequently asked questions in creating a bank of how do we analyze the information on my website, coupled with the information that comes from my website, from my WhatsApp conversations, and create an FAQ bank and brainstorm how exactly I can put that together to ensure that I satisfy my customer requirements and build lead generating activities from there. And then lastly, product features, right? But this, brainstorming and ideation doesn't just end there. It can expand into how we build code. So how do we use large language models and AI to help us create code, or to design new visual ideas using natural language to ensure that we build consistently across our ecosystem. Editing and improving is the fifth one. And this is around how do we how do we build clarity and professionalism of text and information that we've already written, right? So oftentimes what I do is I create content and like a blog, and the blog would not necessarily be sequenced in the right manner because of just how my brain works. And what I do is I would then give that document to my large language model of choice, which is Claude, and I ask it to edit and improve the writing style, but don't change the tone, don't change the ethos upon which I've written it. but it just synthesize the information in a logical sequence to ensure that it comes across professionally and easy to read. So the last equalizer is around answering business questions. What I like in particular about this one, and this is why I've highlighted it in a slightly different color, is if we are to seek out a business mentor or a business coach, it can come at quite a steep price. And if we find ourselves in a current stage of our business where we are not generating revenue at a particular point where we're able to afford that type of coach, we could train our large language model or an agent to act as a life coach or act as a business coach or act as a visionary entity that thinks along the lines of, for instance, Elon Musk or the Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, to help you uncover the challenges related to your business in terms of building out business strategy or platform business model strategy, or how you can orchestrate your technology in order to gain the maximum benefit from your business based on the current stage of your enterprise. So we've understood what these 6 equalizers for small business tasks are. What I'd like us to do is to watch a short video around how organizations are using an AI coach in order to become more effective in the workplace. And then we'll come back.
Hi, Parker. We'd booked time to chat about John. How is that going?
Nadia, I'm pretty frustrated. John's a VP who should be setting big goals, not making excuses. He's got to be a more ambitious leader.
You're frustrated, but we've talked about how you failed to set new people up for success when you're moving too fast. John hasn't had a proper chance. Let's problem solve this. Can I set up 15 minutes for you and me on Friday when things are usually calmer?
So what we've just seen in Nadia, which is the AI coach that has helped these individuals become better business leaders, better founders, better managers, better people in the workplace, you could build the exact same or similar experience using Meta AI, ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini to ensure that you follow a reasoned, structured pathway to the challenges that you're experiencing as a solopreneur or a business owner. So now what I'd like us to do is to jump into the misconceptions of AI. We've got 5. The first misconception is treating AI as a search engine. And I might have echoed this slightly earlier in the sense that we have, for the longest time, we've used Google as a search engine, which is what it is, but it's progressing to this hybrid search engine, right? So at the moment, if you Google anything, you will receive an AI answer before you receive a field of sponsored search links. So it's moving from a search engine to an answer engine. And what's important is that we don't treat AI as a search engine because it's not searching, as we've uncovered throughout the course of this submodule. It's predicting based on the content and the knowledge base that it currently has. Right. So search engines receive existing or retrieve existing pages. And in some cases, they receive or retrieve sponsored pages that you've paid for as far as Google Ads are concerned. But AI generates new text by way of prediction. Right? It doesn't look up answers. It constructs the answer. So what we have to do is we have to always verify the facts and citations to ensure that the answers that are being surfaced are factual. Right. The second misconception is what I believe is possibly the most important one. It's if AI said it, it must be correct. We've spoken about this quite extensively over the course of this session. AI makes mistakes. It invents citations. It does not surface a bug that needs to be fixed. But inherent to how large language models work, it simply just, it's over enthusiastic in the way in which it surfaces that content. So, critical evaluation of every single output is what's needed, and it's probably the most important AI skill that you can develop, right? To critically evaluate the outcome. An adjacent challenge that we have to this misconception is what I call techno-solutionism. It's this belief that technology is the answer to everything that we have in life. That it's the answer to everything that we can't do in life. But let's take this one step further, right? When you think of techno-solutionism, I want you to think of people that you are inspired by. I mentioned earlier, Elon Musk or Satya Nadella, or in some cases Sam Altman or Dario Amandai, which is the CEO of Claude or Anthropic, the organization that built Claude AI. And think of the last time that you've read something that they have said. Oftentimes, what I've come across is that when people reference the future of work, or the future of business, the future of how artificial intelligence is going to influence the world of work, they reference these four individuals. And the problem is that these individuals are building technology, so they're closer to the technology, and therefore their frame of reference is always the potential that this technology can reorganize how we do things. But what's important for us to do here is that we are careful not to just accept a future that we didn't sign up to, a future that your business does not solve for, especially for us on the African continent, that we build a business and a technology-oriented future that solves for the future of Africa, and not someone that's not building for a massively young population, which we have on the continent of Africa, right? So that's the misconception too. It's around not thinking that AI is always correct, and also not thinking that technology is the answer to everything that we have in life. The third misconception is that AI will replace my expertise. That what we need to understand is that AI is a force multiplier for capability, right? The more you know about your business, the better you can evaluate the outcomes or the outputs that AI produces. And the better you're able to direct, the better you're able to evaluate, the better you're able to use those AI outputs. And without your expertise, all the AI output is, it's unverified, and it's unfiltered and unvalidated. So therefore, it cannot replace your expertise, because without your expertise, it's going to produce unverified, it's going to fabricate information, and it's going to create misinformation, so to speak. The fourth misconception is thinking that AI is a person and it understands me. There's a big word in the sentence on screen at the moment that you can see there. It's called anthropomorphism, right? And I'll explain a little bit about what that means, but I'll simplify it for you. But this misconception is that AI produces text that sounds empathetic, but doesn't experience any of it. AI does not feel, first and foremost, because it is a mechanical entity, and therefore it cannot feel. And if we take that back to like the cars that we use, the cars that we use have a computer engine, computer box in it, and it's driven by mechanical entities that we need to service on a regular basis to ensure that it maintains its longevity and continues to take us from point A to point B. It cannot feel, right? We feel because we are biological entities. Right? I like to think of, whenever you try to explain artificial intelligence, I like to think of it in five aspects. We are human beings, therefore we have information, IQ, a degree of intelligence when it comes to cognitive understanding. EQ, which is emotional intelligence, and the ability of us to understand our emotions, how we feel, and what triggers the emotions and our behaviors that we experience. Spiritual intelligence, which is the ability for us to always seek a higher purpose and meaning in life, or a deity that we ascribe to become more like. The fourth one is around kinetic intelligence, the ability to know how to move in order to get from one point to another. And lastly, it's around intuition and understanding that sometimes we just know, because we have this gut instinct that propels us in a particular direction. And if I were to ask you, and if you were to reflect on those five, IQ, EQ, SQ, spiritual intelligence, kinetic intelligence, sort of movement intelligence, and then gut. If you were to think of those five, which of those five do you think that AI could actually replicate or mimic? Because it's artificial intelligence, right? So it's artificially producing something. I would argue that from an IQ perspective, it's able to compute a lot more information and challenge us from an IQ perspective at a phenomenal rate. And then potentially a little bit about movement intelligence and kinetic intelligence. You'll see Boston Consulting Group has created a lot of mechanical AI entities, like if you watch the cricket IPL, you'll see that there's the robotic dog actually brings the cricket ball to the umpires. That's kinetic intelligence. It's got some degree of understanding, but it's programmed to move between certain locations based on camera sensors that are located all around it. But it's not a person. And that's the misconception. I want you to realize that we are powerful psychological entities. AI is not a psychological entity. It is a mechanical entity, right? The last misconception that I'd like us to think about is AI is natural and objective. And it is not natural and it is not objective, right? Every AI system reflects the value, the priorities, and the biases that are embedded within its training data and the choices that its developers have made when building the prediction model or the machine learning model. So AI is trained primarily on English language in Western countries. Hence, every single output that you receive, if the output includes the word organization, it will have a Z as opposed to an S, unless you've prompted it to remove that a Z and S synthesization. And therefore, it will have gaps. It will have biases when applied to the South African business context, right? And recognizing this is an important beginning for responsible use. And I want you to take stock of that there. So over-reliance on AI will mean that you embody one of these misconceptions. And it will ultimately lead to a concept called AI psychosis, right? Believing that it actually is human, that it can feel, that it can provide factual advice, and that you don't need to review any of the outputs because it sounds like it's real. I can trust it because it looks like the responses are factual. And I want you to guard yourself against that. Right? We are hardwired to look for humanity in every single thing, and that is why you give your vehicle a name. Mine is called Wilma because she reminds me of Wilma from the Flintstones. As entrepreneurs, we can leverage this hardwiring to look for humanity in everything, to build massive brand loyalty that is built on human entities as opposed to robotic entities. Right. So, trust it, question it, communicate with it responsibly. And as we've discussed over the last couple of minutes, the technical aspects of AI that it understands. We need to understand, rather, that it's a prediction model. It doesn't retrieve information, it creates information, and it can fabricate. We cannot outsource our thinking, right? We have to ensure that we protect our trust that we've built with our customers and the relationship we've built. We have to deepen that relationship by verifying every single output with a healthy degree of skepticism, to ensure that we cross-check every single fact that is produced, and then that we have to maintain our judgment. Right? We cannot outsource that. Then lastly, we have to ensure that we interpret and communicate with AI responsibly, by recognizing that it's trained on information that's inherently biased because it's trained on the open web, and therefore we have to interrogate that output responsibly. So how do we create this interrogation? What I want you to do is to select your large language model of choice or of preference. Maybe it's ChatGPT for this circumstance. I want you to type in what are the biggest challenges facing small businesses in South Africa in 2026. You're going to use the technical lens, the critical lens, and the mental model lens, or the communicative cognitive lens, and ask yourself those three questions there. Does this response make sense, given what I now know about AI and how it generates text? You're going to ask yourself, how accurate is this information based on what you know about the small business industry in South Africa? And then lastly, you're going to ask yourself the question, did you make the most of this fact? What's the risk of sharing this with others if it's left unchecked? And what's great about this model is that you've got a structure around how you can interrogate AI to ensure that you're always deepening your relationship with your clients and eventually converting or monetizing that relationship. Right. So as we wrap up this sub-module, there are 4 takeaways that I'd like you to walk away with. The first is that AI predicts the next probable word. It doesn't retrieve information. It simply creates new information based on the prediction model, and we need to verify its output. There are 5 misconceptions that we need to correct. Misconception 1, it's a search engine. 2, it's infallible. 3, it replaces expertise. And 4, it is a person. And lastly, it's neutral. It is none of those. And those are misconceptions that we need to correct. We've built a 3-step structured model for evaluating every single output. Technical, we need to look through the output of AI through a technical lens. We need to not outsource our thinking capability. And we need to remain the judge and jury of the mental. We need to build a mental model that helps us remain the judge and jury of the output and not outsource that as well. Right? AI is a capacity equalizer. And that's such an important factor for us as entrepreneurs, because we are able to access professional grade output at 0 marginal cost. So as we conclude submodule 2, hit the pause button on the video, and for 10 minutes, I want you to reflect on these 3 questions. Which of the 5 misconceptions are you most guilty of? What would you change if you corrected it? Or rather, what would change if you corrected it? The second question that I want you to reflect on is, if you remember back, we've got these 6 what AI can do for me in my business equalizers. I want you to think of each of those 6 categories and think about how leveraging each of those 6 would help you simplify and expedite the tasks in your business. And then lastly, what are the business tasks that you're going to leverage AI for this week or next week? What are the first business tasks that you're going to try with AI over the foreseeable couple of days? And what would you need to do in order to verify that output? I want you to reflect on those there. That brings us to the end of today's lesson on digital literacy with an intro to AI. I hope you found it useful and beneficial to yourself and your business. Join us next time when we'll continue with Module 1, focusing on building your second brain and safety, data, and your digital footprint. Until then, I'm Devon Parbu. See you soon.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Devon, for that beautiful presentation. All right, so Devon will be back with us soon with a lesson on Module 1, Topic 3 and 4. Let's keep up the good work. Let's keep learning and growing together. Until next time, my name is Karabo Mohole. Peace.